Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Kamara. Today I'm going to show you how I use the pivot table to perform completeness tests. For example, when we receive the GL detail, because sometimes we normally do data analytics in audit. So once we receive the GL detail from the client, we wanted to make sure the data is complete. That is, the GL detail is complete. So how do we determine the completeness of the data? Is by comparing the numbers in the GL detail to our trial balance, because we know the GL detail normally filters down to the trial balance. So that's the reason why when we are trying to determine the completeness, we summarize the GL detail. Once we summarize the numbers, we compare those to the trial balance. And how do we do the summarization? Is through the use of a pivot table. So the pivot table is very useful in summarizing data. So that's one of the key function of the pivot table is to summarize a huge data set into meaningful information that management or individuals can use to determine or make decision. This is the GL data. Assuming this is the GL data that we've received. So you can get this by going to the QuickBooks online test drive. This is Craig's design. Is a test drive that is available. You can go there and download the GL or the general ledger. I will also add the link to the description. So if you need to run the report for the GL data, you can go to that link and download this report. First of all, before we can run a pivot table has some rules. We are going to make sure we remove the blanks in our area of interest, like for example the description, because if we go to the trial balance currently has descriptions. As you can see here, you have the names here, checking, then you have savings, all the different accounts, they have their own description. So first of all, before we can run the summary, let's just say amount, because at the end of the day we want to compare apples to apples. So this amount here, this amount column, if you look, this also we have amount here, right? So this amount is just a debit and credit. So the credits are in negative form, whereas the debits are in positive. So now let's just get the amount by debit minus credit. So we get our amount here. So we drag it down by just double click. So now we've got the debit and credit amount. So at the end of the day, our total nets to 0, which means the debit and credit are equal. So now this is just a first test. So now let's go to the GL. To our main purpose is to test this GL detail to make sure it's really accurate or complete, because if they give you a data that you are going to test for, perform some analytics on, you want to make sure the data is complete. Because if the data is not complete, maybe they remove some of those transactions that would have raised some eyebrows, meaning we will not be able to get like an accurate conclusion. So that's the reason why we always wanted to make sure that this GL data is complete. How do we determine the completeness? Is by comparing the numbers here in this GL data to the trial balance. So, but right now you cannot do that because these are not apples to apples. You can see checking just one line and then you have blank spaces. So even though all these numbers relate to checking, but it does not include like the description for the whole lines or rows. So you can see the total for the check-in. This is the first step. So first, let's just highlight these blank rows, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we populate the entire description so that we have the various account names for all the rows that relate to that account. For example, this is check-in. We know row 8 is also checking, so we want to make sure that checking is populated throughout. So how do we do that? So we go to find and then go to special. You can just control G or command G to go to special. So we select blanks in this case. So once we select blanks, we press OK. So now we can say equal to. So once we press the equal to sign, we can use the up arrow and then hold the control and or command enter. So once we hold the command and do enter, so you can see we've populated the various account names. So now we can just copy by command C. So we can just command C and then go to paste special, then we paste values. So now we've populated the numbers here. So again, so now let's just add a filter. So we can just add a filter. So now once we hold the shift command down arrow, let's go now and look for the filter. You go to the menu, you can select filter here. So now we've turned on the filter. Okay, so now once we turn on the filter, so if you are on Windows, you can just hold Control Shift L. That should give you the filter. So now if we go back to this, you can see that we have filtered the columns, but let's filter for blanks, because at the end of the day we want to make sure we delete all those blank rows. Now let's just select blanks. So now you can see these are all the blanks. We're using the date column. It is the date column that we apply the filters. So now we go shift command down arrow and then command minus to delete. We command minus again and delete. So now let's unfilter these columns. So now you can see we have populated the column that we interested. So this is just for the column that we're interested, because the reason why we are doing this, because at the end of the day we want to compare these column numbers to this. But until we summarize it, before we can do that, let's just highlight the entire range. And then so we could turn this into a table, but in this case I'm not going to do that. We are going to insert a pivot table. So once we click OK, so now it took us to a new sheet. So this is where we're going to use the pivot table. So you can see the pivot table has filters. You have the rows, you have the values, then you have the columns. So let's first filter the row. Okay, by rows mean, you know, Excel divided into columns and rows. So rows, these are the rows, these ones with the numbers, these are the rows. So what do we want to be in this row, and what do we want to be in the columns? So that determines. So whenever you click on the pivot table, this pivot table field will pop up. So now let's just, our interest is the description, because at the end of the day we want to get this trial balance description to compare it to our calculated numbers from the GL detail. Because at the end of the day, as a normal accounting practice, we want to make sure the GL totals tie back to the trial balance, because the trial balance is just a summary of the GL numbers. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that everything ties back. So now the amount will be, we put it in the value. Okay, so now you can see we have a total here, because as a good practice, this total should be 0. Okay, but in this case we have a total. The reason being because we have some accounts, for example like account payable, this should be a credit balance, but as you can see right now it's showing as a debit balance, because it doesn't take into consideration the debit and credit in this case. Whereas in our trial balance, we can see here we have some that are debit and credit. So there is a workaround how I normally do it. So for example, so first I will just copy this and paste it as value so that I forget about the pivot table. So remember, this pivot table is just a basic way to show you how to summarize data. There is going to be another tutorial where I will go into the pivot table in detail as a data analytics tool, where we can obtain the data and then summarize them in a pivot table and then make pivot charts, all that kind of good thing. But in this tutorial, I just wanted to show you how you apply pivot table in real life in an audit environment and also accounting environment. So now we have summarized this pivot table, but we have a total here because we have numbers that are debit and credit. So first of all, for us to know which number should be credit and which number should be debit, we need to bring these numbers here first. We need to bring these. But remember, the first number we have here is checking, right? But in our pivot table, you see, we have different numbers. So first of all, we're going to use Xlookup. If you haven't seen my video on Xlookup, I advise you watch that video to show you how the basics of Xlookup. We're going to use Xlookup in this case. We're going to use wildcards. Wildcards is just an asterisk and the and. So the asterisk in Excel is the wildcard, this one. Whenever you don't get like an exact match, this is what we use, wildcards and the ampersand. So here you can see the reason why we're going to use wildcards. Let's see, you can see here installation. We have installation, right? Then fuel, there is automobile fuel, but when you go, okay, let me start with this. You have decks and patios. So decks and patios, if we go to the trial balance, you can see, let me just search Command F. So these are the decks and patios, right? You can see the decks and patios. This is what we have currently. We have job expense, job materials, and decks and patios. So in this case, we want to make sure we use wildcards, because if we just say decks and patio like it is right now, we're not gonna get like any result. So first, also you can see there is an indentation when we use the pivot table. We have some spaces, so we're going to remove these first. We have some softwares that we use in data analytics. You can automatically remove some of these spaces. I'm going to do it manually by just deleting the space, these leading spaces. Okay, so once we've removed the spaces, we have like normal words. So now let's use the Xlookup to bring the numbers as per the trial balance. So first of all, we are going to bring the numbers here as per the trial balance. Let's just say as per TB. I believe all auditors know what TB stands for, so, or accountants. So that's the reason why I don't say trial balance. I'll just say as per TB in this case. So now let's use the Xlookup. First of all, before we say the lookup value, we're going to use the ampersand. I mean the wildcard, right? So first we are going to put it in because since this is a wildcard in Excel, whenever we use words or symbols, we always put them in quotation marks. So that's why we're going to put it in quote, and then we're going to put the asterisk, which is the multiplication sign, and then in quote again and say, and we select this patio. So now the lookup array, now we go to the trial balance. This is our lookup array. So we're going to select this, and then our selection should stop at this miscellaneous, and then we are going to lock that using the Fn and F4. The amount that we want to return, this is the amount. As you can see, we have, if not found, we're going to leave it at blank. So we just say comma, and then the match mode, we're also going to put another comma. So now what we need is the wildcard, which is the number 2, as you can see here. Number 2 is the wildcard. So now we select number 2 and brackets close, voila, enter. So you can see, you see, so now it has brought us the number, which is the numbers from the trial balance. Okay, so these are the numbers. So as you can see, these numbers, the only challenge we have, some of these numbers, you can see they are credit, but our pivot table is showing debit, even though the numbers are the same, but they did not include the sign, which is credit for liabilities and income, and debit assets and expenses. So here we can see we have credit numbers and debit. So first we need to paste. We're going to copy this and paste this formula as value so that we are going to do further manipulation. So now these are the values. So we are going to insert a column, Command Shift plus or the equal to sign. We're going to get like this, adjusted or updated. So we are going to use this as the updated amount. So now we are going to turn these numbers to match these values, because right now we have some that are negative, some that are positive, but here we don't take into consideration the sign. I could do it manually, like for example, I can go and enter here and turn this to negative, you know. I can change all these manually so that I can find my variance here, but I'm not gonna do that, because for me as an auditor or accountant, I always want to find the best and easy way possible to do something. So that's just me. Maybe if I start doing something and I realize that I'm taking too much time on that thing, first, if I'm just trying to understand it, I wouldn't mind spending time. I will always look at a better way to do something. I know there are a lot of Excel experts out there. This is purely from an audit standpoint, because we do a lot of data analytics. Before you can get the numbers to the software, first you have to ensure the data is complete. So that's what we're doing here. So now let's turn these numbers to match this. So how we do that, you can go the manual way, but I always prefer the shorter way, right? By using a formula. So I'm going to use the if function. I'm going to say if this, right? If this column, which is the as per the trial balance, which has the correct numbers, negative and positive number. The trial balance has already indicated the positive and negative numbers. But what we've derived, the numbers that we've derived using the pivot table did not indicate whether they are positive or negative. Only they are mostly positive numbers. So now that's why we're saying if the numbers as per the trial balance are less than, they are less than 1, okay? If the numbers in the trial balance are less than 1, we are going to say this, we are going to multiply it by -1, right? So that is how we convert it into a negative number. If it is less than 1, because all negative numbers are less than 1, right? So in fact, they are less than 0. So that's why we say if the numbers as per the trial balance are less than 1, we are going to multiply our numbers here times -1. So the -1 will convert the number to a negative number, but the value will still remain the same. So let's say we have 191.64. If this number was to be a negative number, we multiply by -1. The number won't change, but the sign will change if it is supposed to be a negative. That's what we're saying. If the number as per this trial balance is less than 1, we are going to multiply this by this. Otherwise, just bring us this number, okay? So that's what we're just doing. If that is less than 1, you multiply the number as per the pivot table times -1. If that is not the case, just bring us the same positive number because that number is positive. So we say equal. We press enter. So now let's just drag this. So as you can see, so now let's see. You see, so now all the numbers that are supposed to be negatives, we've changed them to negative. So now we are going to copy this and paste them as values, right? So let's just paste as values. So now you see the next thing now, we're going to find if there is any variance. Because remember, if there are variances, remember when we previously when we had a total, right? We add a total. So now the reason why we are seeing the count instead of like the totals, because of these NAs. NA mean the number was not found. So now let's just get this total, Command Shift T. The total now that we're seeing here is as a result of a variance. So now let's get the variances. So if we say the number as per the trial balance minus our number now, let's look at what we got. So the first one says is exact. So the first one, there was no variance. So the first one says no variance, whereas the other one says there is a variance. So you see the reason why we have the variance here, because this should be positive number. So let's just change this, because this discount given was actually negative on the pivots. In real life, these are the ones you go to the clients, you ask the client why we have these variances. That is after you've investigated to make sure this is indeed a variance. Then that's the time you reach out to the client to know why are these variances. So you might be able to understand, or you can also investigate first before you can do that inquiry, because in audit you wouldn't want to like ask questions that the client might look at, the client might feel like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he is doing. So that's why before you ask questions, make sure you've done some research and make sure your variances are actually variances, because there are many times when you can query something, but when you've started investigating or reach out to the client might have like quick answers for you, which might make you look bad really. So that's the reason why make sure you research before you reach out to the client. So yeah, so that was it. So the pivot table has helped us to summarize the data and then do our reconciliation. That is, we've reconciled the trial balance here, the numbers as per the trial balance, to our general ledger. So you can see this was a large data dump, which would have been very difficult for us to ascertain what the total numbers are for all these various accounts. But with few clicks, we've got our numbers directly. So we have been able to compare these numbers directly. That was it. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like if you like the video. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you will get notified as soon as I upload new videos.